Ohio gozaimasu. Good morning from Osaka, Japan. I'm just in Osaka for a short trip, so I'm here in a hotel room. Um, I'm going to talk to you today about a pioneering herping and culture tour in Japan called Quest for the River Dragon. And first, I will talk to you a little bit about the tour leader, which is myself, and also the expert super team that I put together to introduce each region and each region's um, herpetofauna. And then we'll talk a little bit about the actual fantastic species that we're hoping to see and probably can see. And then a little bit about the culture element of this trip, because you can't really come to Japan and not at least try and get some sense of the very special culture here. Um, yeah, and then a little bit about things like, practical things like accommodation, food, that kind of thing. And I'll just start my timer because I tend to talk for too long about Japanese giant salamanders when I get excited. So without further ado, I'm just going to move this so I can read what I'm saying. So just to cover some of the special features of this tour, or the highlights, if you like. So, as the name suggests, the river dragon, it's not an actual dragon, obviously, but that's a name that's sometimes given to the Japanese giant salamander. And first of all, we have an excellent chance of seeing the Japanese giant salamander in the wild and learning about, well, my efforts to conserve them with various guest scientists. Um, Obviously, as I'm sure you're all aware, that you can never say there's 100% chance of seeing any particular species in the world, but given the timing and my knowledge of the area we'll be visiting, I would say there's as close to 100% as you can possibly get, whilst it's still being a natural non-fate tour. So yes, almost 100% chance. And then this tour visits very different regions of Japan. So we also head to the tropical region, almost in Taiwan, which is Okinawa. And there's some superstar species down there as well. And just two that I've highlighted here are the Anderson's crocodile newt and the Ryukyu black-breasted leaf turtle. Very photogenic um, creatures. Then, of course, again, just about the culture side. So we will be visiting very different regions. So we'll start off in Tokyo, and we'll have some time to visit some of the major sites. So that's obviously a mega city, the world's largest city, but it's also very safe and very clean and very interesting. And then we've also got Kyoto there, which is the old cultural capital of Japan with very high number of World Heritage sites. And then also when we're in Kyoto, near there is Japan's largest freshwater lake, which is Lake Biwa. So we'll spend time there. And again, just, it's going to be, uh, I'm also I'm I'm basically a nature and adventure guide, but I've also been doing cultural tours in Japan for over 10 years, so I can give you an insight to various aspects of the Japanese special culture. And an important part is that really excellent photographic opportunities with not just expert reptile and amphibian guides, but also expert photographers. And we will see some of the amazing photographs taken by our regional guides as we go through this tour. A very important aspect, I think, and I think quite an exciting angle, is that basically this is a first, a pioneering tour. Japan doesn't have ecotourism as the West kind of knows it. So this is, as far as I can see, this is the first ever reptile and amphibian tour of Japan by anyone, by any company. So it can make a really big difference, and also sort of introduce to Japan how important these wonderful, amazing, and sensitive creatures are to the wider world, which I hope then will encourage stronger and better conservation practices. Okay, so moving on. About me. So I'm originally from the Cotswolds in the UK. I trained as a safari guide in Tyrone's home country in South Africa many moons ago, and I also spent time doing biodiversity surveys. I've been based in rural Japan for 15 of the last 17 years. I had no interest in Japan before I came here, to be honest. So my love for Japan is, I guess you could describe as organic, and just, I came, loved it, and I've stayed pretty much. And like I've mentioned before, my main focus, especially these days, is on nature guiding and adventure guiding, such as cycling tours and hiking tours. And I've been doing that since 2013. Specific reference to amphibians. So I've been providing Japanese giant salamander conservation and viewing tours since 2017, when the Japanese Ministry of Environment asked me for some help in getting a tour going. They'd been planning one for a while, but didn't quite have the expertise to do it. So once I learned about that and sort of fell in love with the giant salamanders myself, I realized that, one, how truly special they are, and also the pretty difficult situation they face. So I decided to take on, the mission to help them out myself, and it's pretty much become 90% of my life and my wife's life these days. So, for good and bad, mostly good. So I established a non-profit organization called Sustainable Dyson, which you can look up online if you so wish, in 2021. And we've also launched a Save the Japanese Giant Salamander campaign around the same time. I'm the first and only ever non-Japanese licensed Japanese giant salamander handler and researcher. They're protected by law here that only licensed people can touch them or handle them in any way. And there's very few people qualified to do that in Japan. I had to jump through a lot more hoops, but I finally managed to get there, and means I'm able to conduct research in the area. And practice Shugendo. Shugendo is like an ancient mountain religion in Japan. So a big part of my mission is to try to almost remind Japan, if it's okay for me to do that, about, famously they had a very deep and strong and good relationship with nature, but definitely since around 100 years they've kind of less so and lost their way a little bit. So a big part of our project is the education side and trying to reconnect Japanese people to nature. Okay, that's me. So just about the Japanese giant salamander campaign, my efforts are focused on the Nawa River Basin, which is in Tottori Prefecture, the most rural prefecture in Japan, has the smallest population. And basically, again, you can read more about this on our website if you like. But basically, we're taking a kind of holistic approach where we're doing practical conservation, organic farming, chemical-free farming, I should say, and also elements of forest rewilding. And here is an example of some of the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years. So in the top left there's a tunnel that I found with a huge blockage in a very important breeding area. So the US Marines joined me from a base here, and we managed to clear this several tons of debris. And also we constructed some bypass ramps by lifting these heavy rocks. So as you imagine, the US Marines are probably the best volunteer base you could ever dream of. In the bottom left corner, we've had international experts come over, and we've made some nest boxes and shelters with leading researchers. And in the bottom right, you've got Dr. Amel Borzé in the foreground here. He's the co-chair of the IUCN SSC Amphibian Specialist Group, so the world's top amphibian expert, pretty much. And he's joined us with a team of international experts a couple of times. So we're really doing some pretty pioneering stuff ourselves. Okay, moving on before I talk too much. So when we spend time in the Kyoto and Lake Biwa area, we'll be joined by Shintaro Seki. And he is a legend and superstar amphibian and reptile person in Japan. He operates a couple of non-profit organizations, including an aquarium and breeding center that we can visit. And he's actually published more than 67 books with photographs for each and every species. So yeah, if there's something he doesn't know, then nobody knows it, I'd say. But interesting, so he told me that he's always dreamed of guiding non-Japanese visitors and teaching them about Japan's herpetofauna. So this is his, so if you come, you can help him fulfill his dream. What more could you possibly ask for on a trip? Okay, and then moving on. So when we get to Okinawa, our local guide is an English fella like myself called Mark Thorpe. He's an incredible photographer and videographer. He's been in Okinawa for several years. He's won many awards, and as you can see, he also used to be a film producer and cameraman at National Geographic Television and Film. And shortly, we will see some of his incredible work. So, as I mentioned before, this is a really great experience to learn tips about photography, as well as learn about the herpetofauna of Japan. And Seki-san and Mark are both extremely friendly people who are more than happy to share their expertise with you. And then finally, kind of a little bit of a bonus one that I've managed to organize is that Professor Kevin Messenger, he's a professor at the Herpetology and Applied Conservation Lab in Nanjing, and he's also a co-coordinator for the IUCN Viper Specialist Group in East Asia, and also an author. Kevin worked with me in the summer doing habitat surveys for the giant salamanders, and we also spent a lot of time looking for mamushi and other Japanese endemic snakes. So he's agreed to join us in Okinawa. So when we're in the field, any vipers we find, we've got one of the top world leading researchers on hand to help us maneuver it into a nice position and teach us everything about it in the safest possible way, of course. Okay, so just a bit about the Japanese giant salamander. And again, I need to be careful here because I could talk for days. I'll try not to do that because I believe I've got about 8 minutes left in total. So what makes it a special animal? Well, it's one of the largest amphibians in the world. It's one of only a few of the giant salamander species, with other species being found in North America, which is the hellbender. Then you've got a couple of species recognized now in China, and then the Japanese giant salamander. And the Chinese one is a little bit bigger than the Japanese one, but still, it's possible for the Japanese giant salamander to reach up to 1.5 meters. That's 5 feet in old money, I believe, in the wild. I would say the ones that we see, to be honest, when we see the smaller ones, it's more exciting, so it's a better sign for the health of the environment that we find them in. But generally, anywhere between 20 centimeters and 80 to 90 centimeters, if we're lucky, are the ones that will be coming across. Heaviest recorded individual was 44.3 kilos. Again, that's very rare. More sort of around 5 to 7 to 8 kilos would be a pretty big size where we're going. They live in streams and rivers their whole life. They're considered fully aquatic, even though they are capable of coming out now and again, but that never happens, to be honest. I've never seen it other than going over the odd rock here and there. Amazingly, it's thought that they can live up to 100 years based on past records. And yeah, and a very cool feature is that it's had its basically similar body shape now for something like 23 million years. It basically hasn't changed in almost 23 million years. So it's considered a living fossil. It has a lot of trouble, unfortunately, which obviously I can talk more about when you visit Japan. But they're considered vulnerable on the red list, the IUCN red list, and also on the Japanese red list. And as I mentioned before, it's classified as a special national monument, which means only licensed people can handle it. However, that protection doesn't do anything about the problems with the habitat. So dams and agricultural weirs are causing problems along with hybridization with the introduced Chinese giant salamander species, and obviously pollution as well. Okay, and then this is just a quick introduction to where we'll be studying. If you look in the top right in the background there, that's Mount Daisen, the largest mountain in the Chugoku region, and I live halfway up that mountain. And the rivers coming off the north side, so just out of picture shot here is the Sea of Japan. So these short rivers coming down from this sacred mountain have very oxygen-rich and cool water, which means that this makes this habitat a very special and unique one. It's the lowest altitude breeding habitat for any giant salamander in the world. So we believe it should have more protection than anywhere else, biased and biased, of course, but it has very little, so that's something we're working on. And you can just see, so the names of the rivers that make up the basin are there in the corner, but just to show you that might surprise some people is that the water depth where we'll find salamanders, even 80, 90 centimeter ones sometimes, can be as little as 10 centimeters. So just pretty much so that the fish swim in front of their jaws. So we put waders on and we walk up through there. It's not a kind of snorkeling and swimming with monsters kind of experience. It's very much a conservation-based study. Okay, and just a quick more, I'm going to just move a bit quicker now. So this is the distribution through the center of Honshu, and you can see there's some other pockets of salamanders elsewhere, but the arrow points to where we are. And if you can see, actually it's the only place really that it joins onto the Sea of Japan coast on that side. Okay, quick introduction to some of the other species that we're hoping to see. So the two frogs at the top are actually the same species, the Ishikawa's frog. It's basically considered Japan's most beautiful frog, but I guess that's subjective, but it is obviously very beautiful. And this is the blue morph and green morph. Unfortunately, they're endangered due to habitat loss mostly. And then we've got the Ryukyu Kajika frog, quite a common frog. Will potentially set in various different habitats. Another, oh, I'm sorry, I need to go back there. Just got to move something out of the way so I can see my own screen. Yeah, the Ryukyu tip-nosed frog, also an endangered species, but it's one that we're likely to see from my experience. Moving on, so something about the snakes. So we've got the prize keelback, Fairly common one. Then we've also got the Formosan odd scale snake. Got a couple of different names, but that's the one that generally we use. And again, just to be clear, these photographs were taken by Mark Thorpe, so he will be with us in the field when we find a species, so he can teach us how he gets these amazing shots. And then we've got habu famously the most venomous viper group in Japan. And we've got three species that we're likely to see or hopefully can see. We've got, so in the bottom left we have the Okinawa habu, and then we've got on the right here we've got the introduced species, which is the Taiwan habu. Quite common species, so again, almost guaranteed to see these. And there's one more called the Hime habu, which stands for princess. So yeah, that's a beautiful one. And then we've got also the odd tooth snake. They're quite again fairly common one. And then some of the real superstars, lucky finds, but again, good chance to see them is the Ryukyu black-breasted leaf turtle, the just move that here. Kuro Iwa ground gecko. Unfortunately, this is very popular in the pet trade, so there's been a big problem with poaching. And then this guy looks like he's only got two legs, but I promise you he hasn't. It's the Anderson crocodile newt. Yeah, that's a really photogenic one. And also that one's also like the Japanese giant salamander. It's considered a living fossil. As you see, it looks pretty much like a dinosaur. Okay, and then just to touch on, I think I'm a little bit over, so I'll just whiz through this part. So, like I said, Japan, very unique place, separated from the rest of the world for centuries. So it has, very unique and special culture. So we'll get, obviously, just by being here, we can experience that. And so in Kyoto, we can visit some of these famous sites, amongst others, and wander around. And just to touch on accommodation, we have quality 3 or 4 star hotels in Tokyo, Kyoto, and Inago. So those are the 3 areas on the mainland of main island of Honshu, I should say. And then we'll also be staying at this beautiful beach resort, which is not something that people always do when it comes to Japan, but just where we'll be looking, this is the best place to stay for sure, and we can enjoy swimming and touch of luxury at the end of the trip. Okay, and as I said, obviously I don't really have time to go into now, but Japanese food is incredible, and it's a very special feature, so we'll definitely have that. Shouldn't really talk about food when I've got a picture of Japanese giant salamander on the screen, but that was an accident. So yokoso, welcome to Japan, and we hope to see you next year.